In previous tutorials, I showed you how to get started modding Spellmasons, how to test your mod inside the game, how to submit a mod in a PR for it to be used and available in community servers, and how to create a modded pickup. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to mod units in Spellmasons. So this mod is going to be an archer that shoots explosive arrows. It exports a unit, that's the archer, and a custom sound effect. So the sound effect lives right in the directory of the mod, right alongside the modded file. So we declare a name for the sound effect so that we can invoke it later when we want the sound effect to play, and then we include a relative path to that sound effect. That'll come up later. So if you saw the other tutorial, you'll know that a source, like a pickup source or a unit source, is the kind of blueprint for the behaviors of a unit or a pickup, whereas the instance is the actual unit in the game, the entity itself. So the unit source is a little bit more complicated than the pickup source, and I'll walk you through it right now. Unit sources need an ID so that they can be differentiated from other unit sources. It has a description that comes up when you click on it, and an image. This is all in the tooltip. The subtype is rather important. The subtype determines what kind of unit it is, whether it's a ranged line of sight, that's what LOS means, a regular ranged unit, a melee unit, what have you. So if you want to explore unit subtype, it comes from common types. So we'll just go to commontypes.d.ts, and we can see here's the unit subtypes: melee, ranged LOS, ranged radius, and support class. Support class are units like priests that don't directly attack their enemies. So this is a ranged line of sight because the archer needs line of sight in order to attack you. The unit props are custom properties that get applied to the unit instance when it's created, such as its max stats, how much damage it does when it hits you, its attack range, and its blood color. This is just a hex that matches the color, just like you would define in HTML. The spawn parameters determines the probability that it'll spawn. The budget, more expensive units, such as vampires, cost more budget, and this determines the balance of the game. If you need help with any of these things, just reach out to me in the modding channel in Discord. And at what level the unit is available. So it can't spawn before level 7. The animations this one's reusing archer animations, and we're just tinting this archer to make them a different color. In the spell tutorial, I'll show you how to bring in your own custom animations. For now, this is just referencing the archer animations from the sprite sheet that I explained in the pickups tutorial. So its idle animation is where it's just hanging out. The hit is when it takes damage, the attack is when it's shooting, the die is when it dies, and the walk is when it's walking. Sound effects, similarly, there's when it gets hurt and when it dies. These are already predefined. So the init function receives the unit instance itself, and you can run custom setup code. So in this case, we're using a filter to replace certain colors with others, which is going to result in a tinted archer. So that's the regular archer. Here's the explosive archer right here. So this guy's purple. It looks kind of cool. And when I click on him, it shows that information that I showed you in the source. It doesn't have an image, and so it's not going to play one of these GIFs, but it has all of that information. Okay, so here's the action. This is kind of like the effect function in a pickup. This is the function that gets invoked when a unit is taking its turn. So it is an asynchronous function because it can play animations. Here is the unit instance that's passed in. The attack targets, I'll go into this in a second, the game state, and don't worry about this for right now. So the attack targets are defined in a different function, and this is because we need to know what a unit is going to do before it actually does it in this function, in this action function right here. So that's where get unit attack targets comes in. This returns an array of the units that will be damaged by this unit next turn. So this is how we get these icons right here. And if I step in the line of sight of this guy, this icon, I'm being returned in their get unit attacks targets array, so it knows that it's going to damage me. Now the explosive archer is a little tricky because this guy shoots an arrow that explodes. So if I create a golem and then I change his faction so he's on my team, this archer is actually going to hit him, but if I get close enough, the explosion is going to hurt me. So I had to return both the explosion targets and the target that it's going to hit in this get unit attacks targets function so that it properly shows who it will damage. So I'm using a built-in function, get best ranged line of sight target. If we follow this, we can see it's inside of ranged action. So let's go to the type definition file for here, and you can see that it returns an array of units. If you want insight into what some of these functions do, again, just feel free to reach out to me in the modding channel. Essentially, it's doing a bunch of calculations to determine what is the best unit that it could possibly shoot at from where it's standing. So this returns an array. We get the first one. We're saying so long as the first one is not undefined, then we're going to use a built-in function on the game state, which returns an array of units within a radius. So here's the start point, and we can see all this if we hover over this function. Here's the radius. In the case of get unit attack targets, it's never running predictions on AI turn. The predictions only happen on the player's turn when it's casting spells, so we can just pass false for prediction. And then we're returning the target and all of the explosion targets in this array. So that's what gets passed into attack targets. Now when it's actually the archer's turn and the action is invoked, we get the first target, the attack target. We're making sure that he's not undefined again. If an archer's going to attack, we don't want it to move. So we're setting its path to undefined. The path is the path that the archer is going to traverse if it has to move somewhere, and that is assigned in the actual game code. So if we want it to not move for that turn, we just set the path to undefined. Orient determines which way they're facing, so we're going to have the unit instance face the attack target. Now we're going to play what's called a combo animation. A combo animation is defined in the game state, and in this case, it's a archer attack where multiple things happen, not just the archer attack. So play combo animation takes a key moment, and the key moment is a moment inside of an animation, such as when the archer looses his arrow, where the animation is not done playing, but we want the thing to happen, whatever happened from the animation. And in this case, it's creating a projectile. So we're going to create a visual lobbing projectile. I decided for the explosive archer to make the projectile lob up into the air, kind of like glops. There's also create visual flying projectile, which is what the regular archer uses. And if we want it to shoot straight like an arrow, that's the one that we use. In this case, we'll use lobbing just for fun. The coordinates are where the projectile starts. The target is what it's moving to, and the image path, like we talked about before, is a path to something in the sprite sheet. So projectile arrow. This returns a promise. The promise resolves when it hits its target. When it hits its target, we want to play a sound effect. This is the custom sound effect that we declared down here. We're referencing it by the name. This could be whatever we want it to be. I just chose explosive archer attack, and how it knows what to play is it has the path to the sound effect. So then we're going to have the unit take the damage, the attack target take the damage as defined by the unit's properties up here. So the attack target's going to take 10 damage. And then we're going to make the explosion. So we're using the particle collection library, making a bloat explosion with particles. And so that essentially is the explosion that happens when a bloated unit dies. And then we're going to use race timeout. Race timeout is used pretty regularly to protect against mistakes in the code, basically causing the entire game to time out permanently. So we're giving it a large 3,000 milliseconds in order to finish. That should be more than enough time. We give it a name so that you can see in the debug log if it does time out, what made it time out. And then we're going to await all of the promises that come from the explosion targets being pushed away from the explosion. So we have explosion targets from up here. It's everybody but the first target. We're going to map through that, and we're going to make each of those units take explosion damage, and then we're going to push them away from the attack target, and 10 is the magnitude of the push. We could make that whatever we want. Okay, so that was pretty complicated, but it's kind of a complicated unit. It's shooting an arrow and the arrow is causing an explosion. So Spellmasons is really powerful under the hood, and you're getting a look under the hood. And so this is the kind of stuff that you can do. You have a whole lot of control from the particles to the sound effects to what happens to unit state and where they go. So if it doesn't have an attack target, we want it to move. And it's just going to call a default ranged line of sight movement, which basically moves the unit closer to enemies but not too close so it can be in a good strategic position to attack. So that's the entire unit. As usual, we're exporting the mod object in index.ts. We're importing it and we're exposing it to mods. So now all that we have to do is build it, npm run build. And then I already have this mod, but if you were developing it for the first time, you would need to copy the explosive archer and the build directory into the local game files, which I showed how to do in the setting up tutorial. So now I'll show you him in action. Let me go ahead and delete these two other guys. So it's showing that it's going to hit both of us. He takes some damage, shoots that guy and it explodes, and pushes me back and I took damage. So that's the explosive archer. Stay tuned for the next tutorial where I will show you how to create your own custom spells.